welcome to the Third Testament Foundation live stream today. Today I found some texts in the book Mankind at One with God from 1959, and I'm gonna read that a little bit, not everything. I like the ending part. You have the table of contents, and especially this little piece here. The human being in God's image after his likeness is the same as a being whose manifestation and creation are ultimately nothing but a joy and a blessing for living beings. Indeed, for everything and everyone. It is a being who from the depths of his soul loves his neighbor as himself, thereby fulfilling the law of life, which states the structure of the world redemption set up by Christ. Love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to those that hate you, and pray for them that despitefully use you and persecute you, for you shall be the children of your Father, he who is in the heavens. For he lets his sun go up over evil and good, and lets it rain over justice and injustice. So, before we begin reading, let me just introduce a little bit about what he talks about in this text. Martinez, what he talks about. And all symbols are copyright of Martinez Institute. So we have the spiral cycle. We see the 6 colors here that constitute one spiral cycle. And the spiral cycle is the evolutionary stages that we go through in the mineral kingdom, plant kingdom, animal kingdom, which are the 3 physical realms, and then we have the real human kingdom, kingdom of wisdom, and the divine world, which are the spiritual realms. And then we enter the mineral kingdom and in a new spiral cycle. So that is the spiral cycle he's going to talk about in the text. We see that the planet is here in the spiral cycle, going from the orange into the yellow, from the animal kingdom into the real human kingdom. And he talks a little bit about the what you send out, you receive. As you sow, you will reap. So this is a simple, briefly explained. We have the triune principle of x1, x2, x3, or the eternal I that we are, the eternal creative power, and the eternal created manifestations or forms that we create that have a beginning and an end. So those forms are symbolized by these violet cycles, like we send out from the stillness, the center point of what we are, who we are, which is really one with God. At that still point, we send out movement. That could be thoughts or feelings, it could be actions and deeds and words that we say, and those movements go in cycles. Some take longer than others, but they originate from our I and they return to our I. So that is what we send out, we will receive. And also in the form of karma, we can see that these waves that we send out as a living being in this incarnation here, some movements or actions that we send out in this life comes back in this life, but some doesn't come back until much later. And for example, here we have this one life here. We send out actions, and they are not returning until next lives. So, and So we have to keep that in mind, that we are not just living one life, but we have many lives, and that's, if we want to understand Armageddon and the doomsday that are what we're seeing in the world right now, all these troubles that we're going through, we have to understand life in multiple life perspective. And so yeah, um, there's no way out of going forward in evolution, so inevitably we will reach higher and higher states of evolution. So we see here the planet is going counterclockwise in the spiral cycle, and we as micro individuals on this planet, incarnated on the planet, we have to go where the planet goes, just like the cells in your body have to go where you go. So we don't have a choice. So the planet is going towards more and more light and away from darkness. Darkness again is the animal kingdom, where the law rules every man for himself, or that is more blessed to take than to give. And we're moving towards the real human kingdom, where the law is more blessed to give than take, right? So that is also the principle of neighborly love, do unto others like you want others do to you. So we will see more and more of that neighborly love being present on the planet as the planet moves into this real human kingdom symbolized by yellow. And we'll see less and less war and strife and struggling and killing as we move out of the animal kingdom symbolized by the orange color. So with that in mind, I think we can start reading. If you have questions, you can text in or leave voicemails with questions at 1-941-462-3177. And I'm gonna start reading today's reading. It's gonna take about half hour. Third Testament, Mankind Born with God, 1959, chapter 1. The Bible's prediction about doomsday and its fulfillment. In the Bible, it is foretold that mankind will come to experience a doomsday, or an Armageddon, during which the devil will rage with all his might. People will be persecuted and murdered by other people. Everyone will be at war with everyone else. In reality, it is nothing less than the culmination of darkness, or so-called evil, itself that is foretold. This prediction goes on to say that after the dark epoch of doomsday, a new kingdom will arise, a kingdom that will span the entire earth. In this kingdom there will exist only justice, and the people will constitute only one flock and one shepherd, which means one people and one government, one religion, the Holy Spirit, and one God. By then darkness will have disappeared, and mankind will have been saved or liberated from the murderous and all-destructive might of Armageddon or doomsday. Is there any truth in such a prediction? Will such an epoch of terror for mankind really arise, and what purpose would such a situation have? Apart from the fact that the prediction of this epoch is confirmed through the words of Christ, it would not in the long run mean anything whatsoever if life itself did not confirm the fulfillment of the prophecy as a living fact for us here in the 20th century. Doomsday is not a punishment for sins committed. Never before has mankind possessed so much knowledge about and competence for waging war, murdering, destroying, sabotaging, and mutilating as now. With its atomic and hydrogen weapons, it could wipe itself out totally if there were not a hidden power stronger than mankind, namely the power determining that the trees do not grow right up to the heavens, and likewise determining the course of suns and stars through infinite space. But just as there is a meaning or purpose behind the course of the suns and worlds in the eternal universe, so there's also a divine logic and loving purpose behind mankind's experience of doomsday. It is absolutely not, as preached up to now, a punishment for mankind's sins. For, according to the cosmic analysis of the universe, no being whatsoever can either do anything unjustly or suffer unjustly. Any living being constitutes itself the absolutely first cause of its own fate. No energy whatsoever can be released if not from a living being. This holds true just as well in the macrocosm and microcosm as in the mesocosm, which means just as well in the so-called forces of nature and the manifestations and creations arising from these, as in the forces, creations, or manifestations arising from those beings we otherwise know as living beings. The Godhead consciousness, or the universe, is a revelation of love. It is not easy for the unskilled researcher to see any logical meaning in the epoch of doomsday or of the unhappy fates. But not being able to see the meaning of a thing does not mean that this thing is a curse. There can well be a meaning in it. Indeed, there can even be a loving purpose to its manifestation or creation. In order to understand the meaning or purpose of nature's processes of creation or manifestations, one must learn to distinguish the finished manifestations from those still unfinished. By observing all those of nature's processes of creation that are finished and fulfill their purpose, we will never come to witness that they are not a joy and blessing, either directly or indirectly, for living beings. But in nature, or God's creation, there is an ocean of manifestations that are not finished. That these manifestations can fulfill their purpose just as little as people's unfinished manifestations can is a matter of course. Those of nature's manifestations or processes of creation that span hundreds or thousands of years forward in time before reaching their ultimate result cannot, of course, today be a joy and blessing for the living beings in the way that they will be when they have reached their ultimate result and completed their creation. Today, they can even seem to be a curse. But all those processes of creation that nature manages to complete within a period of time during which we can follow them to their complete completion are all, without exception, a joy and a blessing for living beings of one sort or another. You need only think, as previously mentioned, of our own organism and the other blessings of nature creating conditions for living and existing in healthy well-being. To those processes of creation that we cannot follow with our physical senses from the beginning to the end of their course, due to their spanning a period of time much greater than that of our own present physical terrestrial existence, belong, for example, the perfecting of mankind, its development of morality, and its creation of culture. It is easy to see that these phenomena have in far from all instances reached their ultimate result, having become a joy and a blessing for living beings. If the opposite were the case, there would be neither war, illness, starvation, poverty, nor other forms of misery. Everyone would love everyone else. When everyone is, so to speak, at war with everyone else, it is due exclusively to the fact that the mentality of beings and their ensuing behavior are still very far from being perfect or complete. Everywhere that suffering arises, there is something whose creation is not completed by nature or the Godhead. The fact that animals have to kill in order to live, that people hate, murder, kill, mutilate, and make war is an absolute expression of the fact that here nature's great process of creation is not finished. As all the ultimate results of nature's process of creation, or God's manifestations that we are able to see, constitute in all instances a joy and a blessing, and as there is thus in the above mentioned situations, does not occur one single instance where the opposite is the case. We here witness the fact that nature's or God's purpose with all creation is exclusively to transform everything into a joy and a blessing for living beings. Everything is an expression of the immutability of this analysis. We thus here get an absolute confirmation of the presence of an almighty and all-wise creator or Godhead behind all creation, manifestation, and experience of life. As this Godhead is behind all manifestation and creation, and this manifestation and creation constitute so immutably a joy and a blessing for all living beings, the thousands of years old idea that this Godhead's way of being is love becomes here a reality. Why primitivity and sufferings of the epoch of doomsday exist. We all know this previously mentioned experience of life, for we all possess it. We see that this experience, which also contains manifestation or creation, spans from culminating hate to culminating love, which respectively also mean culminating bestiality and culminating humanity. And to the great questions, why should primitivity, ignorance, hate, and suffering, or all the so-called evil exist at all? Why can the being's experience of life not constitute a permanent or uninterrupted experience of wisdom and love? The answer is therefore inevitably this, that in order that the experience of life can at all take place, it must be an experience of contrast. Any experience whatsoever is only possible by virtue of the fact that it is marked by contrasts or opposites. How could an artist produce a painting if there existed only one single color in existence, and everything would therefore have to have absolutely the same color? How could sound pictures, musical works, or the like exist if there existed only one single sound or note? In such a case, how could a spoken language exist at all? How would the experiences of well-being, happiness, and joy be able to occur if one had not previously experienced unpleasantness, unhappiness, and suffering to the same extent as one has met with sufferings? To the same extent as one has met with sufferings or an unhappy fate, one feels the opposite of this fate as well-being, light, and happiness. In order that living beings can experience the very highest form of happiness and bliss, joy, and perfection in the experience of life, they absolutely have to experience the contrast to this high form of life experience, meaning darkness and suffering. For this reason, the form of life experience of all living beings is organized in spiral cycles. These spiral cycles are divided into particular spheres of consciousness that span from the culmination of darkness to the culmination of light, which is the same as the culmination of hate and the culmination of love. Of these spheres of the spiral cycle, the plant kingdom constitutes the first, the animal kingdom the next, and the human kingdom the third. Thereafter, the spheres are no longer of a physical nature, but constitute spiritual or mental planes of existence. These are described in more detail in my main work, Livsbog, where they are called the kingdom of wisdom, the divine world, and the kingdom of bliss. The eternal life of the living beings is thus a passage through these kingdoms. When they have passed these 6 kingdoms, they proceed enter a new spiral cycle in the same way, but in new forms, in order to again pass through the 6 kingdoms of spheres of this spiral cycle, and so on continuously through new cycles in all eternity. In every cycle, the beings come to experience the combination of darkness in order to acquire the ability to experience the combination of light in the same cycle. As the beings have thus in every cycle the experience of the combination of darkness renewed, they have thereby the capacity of their eternal ability to experience life, their ability to experience and to distinguish between light and darkness, and between evil and good, renewed and maintained, and will, by virtue of this talent and their own free will, appear in the light epoch of every spiral as the perfect human being in God's image after his likeness, thus being one with God in all eternity. So that is, if we see these two here, so this one and this one are basically the same, showing the same thing. This is sometimes it's like if you take an x-ray of this symbol, you get this symbol. You see how the spiral cycle is still here with the 6 colors, and but you can see how here in the animal kingdom there's the outermost ring where you can see how the darkness culminates in the animal kingdom, and then it tapers off, and then at the same time the light principle of that spiral cycle grows and culminates over here in where the intuition culminates in the divine world, and then the light tapers off and the darkness culminates again here in the animal kingdom of the next spiral cycle. So that is the contrast that drives evolution, because when we are here in the darkness, here in the animal kingdom, going into the human kingdom, we're fed up with the killing principle, the darkness. So we are satiated with darkness. We long for the light. We have hunger for the light, and that's why we are longing for the light, and we are going this way towards the light, and it feels good to go towards the light. But then when we're up here in the combination of light, then we're actually been here for eons of time. We start to actually long for the contrast to the light, which is darkness. But at this point in time, the darkness feels like light to us. When we start to incarnate minimal matter, it takes hundreds of millions of years into plant matter again. So that is actually what we're longing for at that point. So that's why we are longing for that, and that feels like the light to us, because the darkness is what we're hungry for there. But then as hundreds of millions of years pass, in the next spiral cycle, we actually get fed up with this killing principle, and we again long for the light. And continuously within all the spiral cycles, we see that that's how this consciousness is renewed every time. How we start, if you start at D, you go around the spiral cycle, we end up in E, right? So these 7 organ principles are then repeated as evolution continues in the ever-increasing spiral cycles. Like we go from E, we go around, in one spiral cycle we end up in F, right? So we see how these 7 principles of incarnation, like from atom, cell, organ, to human body resolution, then to planets, suns, and galaxies, and then again particle principle repeats itself. These 7 principles repeats themselves, right? So right now we are in this D spiral cycle, right? Human beings, and so enough of that. So here we're culminating in the animal kingdom, and let's read a little bit more about this. Devil consciousness, or the culmination of darkness, that we're actually just past the culmination of darkness, right? If we see here, here's the culmination right here. What is that? 4 o'clock. And if you look here, 4 o'clock, it's the culmination of darkness. It's kind of hard to see, but there's another symbol showing it maybe a little more better. Here we see the planet, and I see on the bottom, see how this is the animal kingdom, right? The second kingdom. The first is the plant animals, and then the third is the real human kingdom. See how the planet here has just culminated in darkness and is going towards the light. So it's inevitably there's more and more light coming, but still there's most of the experience on this planet right now is darkness, yeah, but it is waning. Devil consciousness, or the combination of darkness. The living beings in such a cycle, so this spiral cycle that we just talked about, thus go through all the existing stages of experience of life and manifestation or creation. If we look at the plant forms of life, we will see that on the physical plane their psyche consists of mere instinctive movements or instinctive creation. The plant can only vaguely sense pleasantness and unpleasantness. It cannot analyze the pleasantness or unpleasantness and thereby experience it as day-conscious fact. But the plant organisms evolve towards becoming animal organisms. These organisms in turn evolve into human organisms, and it is at this stage we find the terrestrial human beings at the moment. They have still a great deal of the animal nature in their mentality and behavior, while having, to a certain extent, developed a human psyche or mentality. Of the human nature, it is mainly the intellectual faculties that have been developed. By virtue of this acquisition of human intellectual faculties without yet having acquired the humane faculties, the behavior of such a human being will be excessively animal, since it is the animal principle that in this case is the dominant one, or maybe animal-like. In accordance with the fact that this person, by virtue of his human intelligence, can promote his animal tendencies to excess, he takes part in promoting the culmination of darkness. No beings on earth can compare with the terrestrial human being in spreading massacre, mutilation, hate and revenge, warm blood bath, or death and ruin over other beings. Terrestrial human beings have thus grown from the stage of the animal in terms of intellectuality, but they are still at the stage of the animal in terms of humanity and love. They therefore constitute neither pure animals nor pure human beings. They are thus beings of mental darkness. Their murderous and pain-inflicting mentality can be expressed only as devil consciousness. They constitute the opposite of the perfect human being in his purest form, who can elicit only intellectualized feelings, which are in turn the same as justice and love. Through this devil consciousness or excessive animal mentality, terrestrial human beings experience that contrast by virtue of which they, as previously mentioned, acquire the ability to experience the light. Doomsday, a cosmic psychological education. Through the culminating state of darkness, or doomsday, God can thus transform the beings into man in his image after his likeness. Here the beings come to feel the effects of the deadly dark existence they inflict on their fellow beings. Through the effects that cause the unhappy fates and states of suffering, the beings will learn how they should live and how they should not live, how they should behave towards their fellow beings and how they should not behave towards them. As we live in the epoch of doomsday foretold in the Bible, It is not difficult to observe it and see how God creates the truly perfect human being by means of this epoch. We see how the old traditions are declining. The religious royal power through which God ruled and guided people in the past now exists only as a shadow of what it was. People want to have the power themselves. They themselves want to rule. We have seen people of little development and in whom the animal is still extremely prevalent come to the pinnacle of power, directing with force of arms and big drums millions of people into the killing principles, derailments, and mutilations of war massacres. And what then was the result of their might? What did they leave behind for people? They left behind great cultural centers or metropolises in ruins. They killed the fathers of millions of children, the spouses of millions of spouses, made millions of people invalids, quite apart from the millions who languished to death in concentration camps and gas chambers or died on the battlefields themselves. They left behind hunger, need, and misery everywhere. Demoralization, materialism, and godlessness prevailed among great sectors of the population, becoming to a certain extent ideals within science, art, literature, and film. The lasting true peace for which people are beginning to long is an impossibility in the world as long as war is still raging over the earth, held in check here and there only by terrifying armed ceasefires and balances of power. And how has it gone for these warlike rulers who believed that they could save mankind by the force of arms, torture, murder, and killing? Have they not themselves perished pitiably in the bottomless pit of war into which they, with such great energy, had led the people? They did not know the eternal law that commands, "Put back your sword in its sheath, for he who takes a sword will perish with the sword. What a man sows, so shall he also reap. What you would have others do to you, do unto you, you must do unto them also." We have here had a little of doomsday, or the combination of darkness at close quarters, and have seen its terrifying conditions. As we have said already, these conditions are not in any way whatsoever punishment for sins people have committed. There is absolutely no question of any anger, punishment, or vindictiveness on the part of the Godhead. What we have seen is exclusively people having violated the laws and principles that determine the continued existence of the universe or the cosmos. As these laws and principles are eternal realities and cannot possibly be abolished or destroyed, it is people who get the worst of it, and so will all who violate the eternal and the imperishable get the worst of it. It is an eternally unalterable law that one can only reap what one has sown. One cannot sow barley and then from this seed grow wheat. One cannot sow anger, hate, and bitterness towards one's fellow beings and then reap their sympathy or love. Seed and reaping, whether purely physical or spiritual, are eternally bound by an irrevocable law, namely the law of cause and effect. In their ignorance, people behave and act in such a way as to become the cause of effects bringing unhappiness into their own fate. So it's kind of important, yeah? The law of cause and effect. But by virtue of the law of fate, or the law of cause and effect, which determines that all releases of energy must return to their source, all beings will come to experience the effects of their behavior towards their surroundings. They will thereby be able to create their fate themselves so that it becomes a blessing, happiness, and joy both for themselves and for others. they will see that when they sow hate, they will come to reap hate, and likewise reap love when they sow love. The epoch of doomsday is nothing less than a cosmic psychological education. Through the events caused by this doomsday, God demonstrates for people what they must do and what they must not do, which people they must put into power, and who they must not put at the pinnacle of power. The dark events of this century speak their clear divine language, showing as fact that war gives rise to war, and that war cannot possibly be wiped out by war. We must here repeat, he who takes a sword will perish with the sword. And what is it we see in the terrors of doomsday? Why were these millions of people who were tortured in this hell or Armageddon, not protected? They were not protected because it was a result of an unfortunate way of behaving that they had practiced in many previous lives that now hit them. It was a seed they had sown in these lives that they then reaped. It is true that the people in question cannot remember their previous lives and cannot therefore understand that they have themselves created the causes of their unhappy fate. But this cannot exempt beings from this fate. This unhappy fate has precisely the purpose of developing the being's talent for sympathy so that the humane faculty can come into existence. And a being with the growth of this faculty can come to love his neighbor as himself, which is the total fulfillment of the law of life. As a being thus comes to reap that fate it has inflicted on others, it cannot in the long run avoid coming to discover its situation. And with this discovery, it begins to change its actions and behavior or way of being in order to become a joy and a blessing for its surroundings or its neighbor. As we know that the organisms of bodies that are killed and mutilated are not identical to the living being, but are only a vehicle for the same being, there is thus no one who in the absolute sense dies because of the existence of darkness or doomsday. Everyone survives even the worst state of darkness and has with them experiences in the new terrestrial life in the form of gifts, talents, and character traits. The experiences of suffering do not promote the development of intelligence, but they cause the being to advance, as previously mentioned, in the development of humaneness. For every terrestrial life in which the living being experiences a dark fate and way of being, it becomes more and more humane or loving in order to finally be able to fulfill completely this state of loving one's neighbor as oneself, thereby being the fulfillment of God's creation of the human being in his image after his likeness. And then the last chapter here. Mankind and one with God, the human being in God's image after his likeness, is the same as a being whose manifestation and creation are ultimately nothing but a joy and a blessing for living beings, indeed for everything and everyone. It is a being who from the depths of his soul loves his neighbor as himself, thereby fulfilling the law of life which states the structure of the world redemption set up by Christ. Love your enemies. Bless them that curse you. Do good to those that hate you, and pray for them that despitefully use you and persecute you. For you shall be the children of your Father, he who is in the heavens. For he lets his sun go up over evil and good, and lets it rain over justice and injustice. When the people of the earth gradually fulfill this way of being, of the law of life, The causal sources, whose blood-dripping effects as a river of doomsday from time to time gushes forth through mankind's mentality and way of being, will dry up. And above the fading darkness of this Armageddon, I see the eternal peace as a shining and warming sunrise come up over a kingdom in which God's command, "Let there be light," has been fulfilled. The people of the earth have become one with God. On that note, I hope to see you next time on live stream. Again, if you want to come with some questions about the text or have suggestions for topics you want covered in future live streams, you can text or leave a voicemail at 1-941-462-3177. So, see you soon.